part of the world, yet it might have been possible to procure for hire a man who would ride post, if Lorna feared to trust the pack horses, or the troopers who went to and fro. Yet no message whatever had reached us, neither any token even of her safety in London. As to this last, however, we had no misgivings, having learned from the orderlies, more than once, that the wealth and beauty and adventures of young Lady Lorna Doone were greatly talked of, both at court and among the common people. Now, riding sadly homewards, in the sunset of the early spring, I was more than ever touched with sorrow, and a sense of being, as it were, abandoned. And the weather growing quite beautiful, and so mild that the trees were budding, and the cattle full of happiness, I could not but think of the difference between the world of to-day and the world of this day 12-month. Then all was howling desolation, all the earth blocked up with snow, and all the air with barbs of ice as small as splintered needles, yet glittering in and out like stars, and gathering so upon a man, if long he stayed among them, that they began to weigh him down to sleepiness and frozen death. Not a sign of life was moving, nor was any change of view, unless the wild wind struck the crest of some cold drift, and bowed it. Now, on the other hand, all was good. The open palm of spring was laid upon the yielding of the hills, and each particular valley seemed to be the glove for a finger. And although the sun was low, and dipping in the western clouds, the grey light of the sea came up, and took, and taking, told the special tone of everything. All this lay upon my heart, without a word of thinking, spreading light and shadow there, and the soft delight of sadness. Nevertheless, I would it were the savage snow around me, and the piping of the restless winds, and the death of everything. For in those days I had Lorna. Then I thought of promise fair, such as glowed around me, where the red rocks held the sun when he was departed, and the distant crags endeavoured to retain his memory. But as evening spread across them, shading with a silent fold, all the colour stole away, all remembrance waned and died. So it has been with love, I thought, and with simple truth and warmth. The maid has chosen the glittering stars, instead of the plain daylight. Nevertheless, I would not give in, although in deep despondency, especially when I passed the place where my dear father had fought in vain, and I tried to see things right, and then judge aright about them. This, however, was more easy to attempt than to achieve, and by the time I came down the hill, I was none the wiser. Only I could tell my mother that the King was dead for sure, and she would have tried to cry, but for thought of her mourning. There was not a moment for lamenting. All the mourning must be ready, if we cared to beat the snows, in 48 hours. And although it was Sunday night, mother, now feeling sure of the thing, sat up with Lizzie, cutting patterns, and stitching things on brown paper, and snipping and laying the fashions down, and requesting all opinions, yet when given scorning them; insomuch that I grew weary even of tobacco, which had comforted me since Lorna, and prayed her to go on until the King should be alive again. The thought of that so flurried her, for she never yet could see a joke, that she laid her scissors on the table, and said, "The Lord forbid, John, after what I have cut up." "It would be just like him," I answered, with a knowing smile. "Mother, you had better stop. Patterns may do very well, but don't cut up any more good stuff." "Well, good lack, I am a fool. 3 tables pegged with needles. The Lord in His mercy keep His Majesty, if ever He hath gotten him." By this device we went to bed, and not another stitch was struck until the troopers had office tidings that the King was truly dead. Hence the snows beat us by a day, and both old Betty and Lizzie laid the blame upon me, as usual. Almost before we had put off the mourning, which as loyal subjects we kept for the King 3 months and a week, rumours of disturbances, of plottings, and of outbreak began to stir among us. We heard of fighting in Scotland, and buying of ships on the continent, and of arms in Dorset and Somerset; And we kept our beacon in readiness to give signals of a landing, or rather the soldiers did. For we, having trustworthy reports that the King had been to high mass himself in the Abbey of Westminster, making all the bishops go with him, and all the guards in London, and then tortured all the Protestants who dared to wait outside, moreover had received from the Pope a flower grown in the Virgin Mary's garden, and warranted to last for ever, we of the moderate party, hearing all this and 10 times as much, and having no love for this sour James, such as we had for the lively Charles, were ready to wait for what might happen, rather than care about stopping it. Therefore we listened to rumours gladly, and shook our heads with gravity, and predicted, every man something, but scarce any two the same. Nevertheless, in our part, things went on as usual, until the middle of June was nigh. We ploughed the ground, and sowed the corn, and tended the cattle, and heeded every one his neighbour's business, as carefully as heretofore. And the only thing that moved us much was that Annie had a baby. This being a very fine child with blue eyes, and christened John in compliment to me, and with me for his godfather, it is natural to suppose that I thought a good deal about him. And when mother or Lizzie would ask me, all of a sudden and treacherously, when the fire flared up at supper time (for we always kept a little wood just alight in summer time, and enough to make the pot boil), then when they would say to me, "John, what are you thinking of? At a word, speak," I would always answer, "Little John Faggus," and so they made no more of me. But when I was down, on Saturday the 13th of June, at the blacksmith's forge by Brendon town, where the Lynn stream runs so close that he dips his horseshoes in it, and where the news is apt to come first of all to our neighbourhood, except upon a Sunday, while we were talking of the hay crop, and of a great sheep stealer, round the corner came a man upon a piebald horse, looking flagged and weary. But seeing half a dozen of us, young and brisk and hearty, he made a flourish with his horse, and waved a blue flag vehemently, shouting with great glory, "Monmouth and the Protestant faith! Monmouth and no popery! Monmouth, the good king's eldest son! Down with the poisoning murderer! Down with the black usurper! And to the devil with all papists!" "Why so, thou little varlet?" I asked very quietly, for the man was too small to quarrel with. Yet knowing Lorna to be a papist, as we choose to call them, though they might as well call us kingists, after the head of our church, I thought that this scurvy scampish knave might show them the way to the place he mentioned, unless his courage failed him. "Papist yourself, be you?" said the fellow, not daring to answer much. "Then take this, and read it." And he handed me a long rigmarole, which he called a "declaration." I saw that it was but a heap of lies, and thrust it into the blacksmith's fire, and blew the bellows thrice at it. No one dared attempt to stop me, for my mood had not been sweet of late, and of course they knew my strength. The man rode on, with a muttering noise, having won no recruits from us, by force of my example, and he stopped at the alehouse farther down, where the road goes away from the Lynn stream. Some of us went thither after a time, when our horses were shodden and rasped, for although we might not like the man, we might be glad of his tidings, which seemed to be something wonderful. He had set up his blue flag in the tap room, and was teaching every one. "Here coometh Maister Jan Ridd," said the landlady, being well pleased with the call for beer and cider. "Her hath been to Lunnon town, and live within a mail of me. Arl the news coom from them nowadays, instead of from here, as her ought to do. If Jan Ridd say it be true, I will try almost to belave it. Hath the good Duke landed, sir?" And she looked at me over a foaming cup, and blew the froth off, and put more in. "I have no doubt it is true enough," I answered before drinking, "and too true, Mistress Pugsley. Many a poor man will die, but none shall die from our parish, nor from Brendon, if I can help it." And I knew that I could help it, for every one in those little places would abide by my advice, not only from the fame of my schooling and long sojourn in London, but also because I had earned repute for being very "slow and sure."